Welcome, everybody. Welcome today, Friday, end of the week. I want to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, custodians, and the land we gather today, and pay my respect to the elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today as well. Very excited to bring Pause Fest online back with carefully curated 7 free sessions every Friday. We started 28th of July until 8th of September, so we have a couple of more sessions for about 30, 45 minutes. Today, we have Discovery of Superpowers with AI. And today we have Stephen Foxworthy from Accenture Song, Fiona Triaca from Naked Ambition, and Joseph Bader.
Yep, perfect.
Bader from D Smile. And what are we talking today? Well, we are going to be uncovering the superpowers of AI in enriching experiences, fostering creativity, and supercharging design. Discover how AI influences integrated oral healthcare, reduces clinical variations, and innovative potential of generative AI. Embrace a design-led approach to AI adoption, reflect on evolving responsibilities and opportunities for designers in an AI-driven landscape. There's a lot. Next week, we have Building a Product with Design Thinking, Deloitte, Zero, and Hockey Stick Advisory. So if you like to stick around for next week as well, that'd be amazing. All sessions will be live after we record. There'll be an article you can rewatch and share. A few more people joining. And now I want to introduce the panelists and we can kick it off. We have a few questions already. Stephen Foxworthy has over 20 years experience in digital with a focus on customer experience strategy and high performance multi-channel marketing. As a frequent writer, speaker, and presenter on digital strategy, digital marketing, personalization, and e-commerce, Steph works to broaden the impact of digital for clients across industries. Stephen is a managing director at Accenture Song. Welcome, Stephen. Fiona has spearheaded Naked Ambition, a design-led innovation agency based in Melbourne for the last decade. She works closely with local and global brands, driving their growth through innovative design. Additionally, Fiona has hosted the Naked Ambition podcast that focuses on enterprises, innovation, and AI. Welcome, Fiona. And Dr. Joseph is a leading dentist and founder of Australia's first dental spa, D Spa. He has redefined the profession and established a focus on preventative care. Dr. Joseph also founded D Smile, an environmentally kind at-home personalized care system, and D Smile Care Foundation to provide free online dental advice and donations. Welcome, everybody. Very distinctive and different industries, and that's very engaging today, talking about AI that sort of, I guess, gather us all under one roof. Lots to unpack here. Who do we ask first? Well, you can answer the questions as much as you want, or skip if it doesn't really talk to you, but maybe just open with pretty broad question. How can AI technology help create great experiences?
Yeah, I might jump in on that one, George.
Okay.
I think we've seen a recent explosion in the accessibility of AI to everyday people. So, in the early 2000s, we had the kind of emergence of machine learning, very much kind of technology and data-driven applications, looking at analysis, looking at prediction models. Boffins being able to look at big data and extract some insights. That kind of evolved into deep learning, where we started to get the machines to do things like speech analysis and text analysis. But now we're in the generation of generative AI, and I think anybody who's been playing around with ChatGPT can see now just how accessible this technology is getting, um, and the general applicability of it in many different kind of domains of work and life. And I think that's what's capturing everyone's imagination right now, which is that you can get your hands on these tools, you can ask questions in really natural language, and the responses you're getting from these generative models now are very high quality, come back in natural language. That gives you answers to questions that you can formulate, have conversations with them that kind of evolve your thinking. And so when we start to think about how do we create great experiences around these sorts of tools, the playground starts to get pretty wide and broad. Now these models can apply themselves into language, they can apply themselves into imagery. We're starting to see the emergence of them being applied in film and video. Things like metaverse and 3D environments now can be generated. And so basically it's a response to being able to how well you describe the problem you're trying to solve impacts the quality of the experience you receive in return. It's very early days. There's still a lot of issues and potential pitfalls to be discovered. But the thing that I think is exciting about this around great experiences is just how accessible the technology's become. Everyone can get their hands dirty playing around with this stuff, and the potential value is becoming pretty clear to a lot of organizations that I'm working with, and a lot of the industries that we can see trends emerging from. It's a pretty exciting time to be playing with this stuff.
Indeed. Fiona, do you want me to follow on from? Obviously, this is the patient experience. We talk about experiences there, Stephen. It's AI in dentistry is almost leveraging that tech has enormous benefits in dentistry in terms of diagnosis, treatment planning, monitoring habits at home, and so on. So these benefits, we're starting to see it. Obviously, as you said, it's sort of early stage, but I just want to share something with you when we talk about patient experience, some worrying stats in dentistry. Yeah, there are 3.5 billion people are impacted by oral health diseases, which in a way not necessarily just impacts the mouth, but also the systemic conditions. So poor oral health can impact systemic diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's. We've seen the link there. And yet, for some reason, we haven't been able to move the dial. So there was a recent survey done by the ADA that found most people don't brush, floss, and rinse. So in order to try and prevent these diseases, it's fairly simple routine at home. Brush, floss, rinse, see the dentist twice a year. It's as simple as that, yet most people don't do it for all sorts of reasons: fear, convenience, access of services. So AI, when you start looking at, okay, well, how can AI help break down these barriers and get more people access to dental services? The other worrying trend is also lack of trust, different variations in terms of what dentists are able to diagnose x-rays. So we know that AI algorithms can analyze dental images now, such as radiographs, scans, intraoral images, with very, very remarkable accuracy, and by leveraging deep learning. So I've been managing a number of clinics over the last 25 years with hundreds of clinicians. And one of the issues is, well, how can you get consistency so that there's no variations, and then the inconsistencies within the diagnosis, which means providing basically the level of care that we need. So there are a number of companies, one in Germany, one in America. There's Second Opinion. So these tech-enabled tech that will actually analyze these x-rays and offer better diagnosis. The second part is digital x-rays in terms of intraoral scans. So in the past, we used to take impressions, send it to the lab, whereas now we use intraoral scans. And AI-enabled algorithms will actually make sure that these scans are accurate as possible. Once patients leave the clinic, usually what tends to happen, we don't have any communications with patients. We don't know what their habits at home are. And so now there are, and it's in particular orthodontics, the orthodontist can actually ask patients to scan their teeth every single week. That information gets relayed to the orthodontist. The orthodontist can look and map out any efficiencies, any issues with teeth moving, and provide advice. So the patient experience there is enormous. And now we're looking at monitoring patients' oral health habits at home and how we can make that better. So yeah, in dentistry, there's definitely a lot of movements. There's a lot of companies that are sort of coming out. I know Invisalign are looking at, again, how do we track people's oral health, not necessarily just oral health habits, but movements of teeth, and how can we make that treatment a lot better and a lot faster. So yeah, it's really exciting what's happening in dentistry at the moment.
Amazing. Great. Fiona, do you have anything to add to this? Your space is also pretty much exploding.
Yeah, I could probably chime in with a bit of a combo of both of those, because I think Stephen's talking about, the potential, really exciting potential in generative AI, more people having access to this. And Joseph's talking about generative AI building on some of the discriminative AI that has been part and parcel of our lives for a long time as well. And I think from the perspective of designers, so for the purposes of this conversation, I might even expand that definition out to business designers rather than just thinking about your classic forms of design, so visual design or graphic design. We'll talk on a more strategic approach. But I think to understand the role that designers can play in creating some of these experiences comes back to, in some part, us understanding the mechanics and the layers of, as Stephen touched on, why all of this is happening right now and how this might indicate where we're going to go in the future. So if we think about, for instance, the sheer size of these foundation models, so the engines that are sitting underneath things like ChatGPT, powered by OpenAI, there's also NVIDIA, Google are other ones as well. So one of the biggest trends that's driving the design in this space at the moment is this open sourcing of these models that wasn't seen previously. So this, I think, from one hand, presents an enormous opportunity from a design perspective, but equally presents a lot of problems. And I think some of the challenges that we're seeing when it comes to designing experiences, or even the speed of this innovation because of these open source models, is we end up in a scenario in a lot of organizations where we have this tech, so what should we use it for? And I think that's where designers can play a really important role in sort of sorting out some of that signal from the noise. Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean that we should. So it's important for designers to be able to understand that problem that we're solving. But I think that, only goes so far and is possibly a little bit of an oversimplification if our role as designers is really just about formulating that right problem. The potential that we have, and talking to some of the things Joseph and Stephen have mentioned there, to take control of that accessibility and to be able to design really comes from, I think, the ability to speak machine. So John Mader, who's the VP of AI and design at Microsoft, talks about this a lot, and he actually uses a really incredible metaphor that I think makes this kind of understanding quite accessible, of this concept of Simon's scissors, which was actually a metaphor created by Herbert Simon, who was a renowned designer and an AI researcher back in the 60s. But he talks about, in the context of AI and the idea of the scissors, one blade being cognition and one blade being context. So cognition is the data that is within the foundation models that we're talking about, all of this possibility that is within, the large foundation models right now. And on the other side is context, and that context is the domain knowledge that every single person that's on this call right now has. And now one blade with scissors is not scissors, it's a knife. So context, cognition alone will not be enough. And context without that cognition isn't as powerful as it potentially could be. So the combination of these two things leaves us in the scenario of where we are right now within business design. So anyone with that deep domain knowledge that Stephen's talking about, where we're able to have a play, we're able to look at, use these tools that are a lot more accessible, it means that, the tools themselves are not as powerful when they're used in a really generalist way, but with that deep domain knowledge, we're able to unlock an enormous amount of value. So I think there's kind of two conversations for designers, and I can touch on this maybe a bit later, but I think there is what can designers do for AI and what can AI do for designers? But rather than us just thinking about what is the output we can get or what is this going to take away from us, the important conversation is, what should we be involving ourselves in order to create, a more safe, sustainable and effective, world of AI.
Thanks. It seems like there's not going to be stone unturned with AI. Seems like there's not going to be a place where AI does not exist in the future. It's all going to have some sort of a layer of AI that enables things, depending on what we do with it. I want to play something in your heads. We're going to play. I didn't tell you this before, but I've heard something on the internet, and I think it'd be great to throw it in at the very end, spice it all up. And I know you're thrill seekers, so this will be perfect. We're going to play synthetic versus real debate, AI. So we'll see what you think about that, but just have that at the back of your mind. Maybe just now, since we kind of opened the conversation about what is it, how can it create great experiences, it's pretty open. Let's maybe dive into some examples, practical examples that you've seen in your industry that you can share with everybody.
Yeah, I might jump in with a couple. Accenture Song is a creative design digital experience agency part within a very large technology powerhouse global business. We've just gone to market and announced that we're making enormous investments in this space to bring particularly generative AI to life for our clients. But on the creativity side of things, there's been very interesting debates going on around, what does creativity mean? What's the role of technology in creativity? We have a couple of points of view on this. One is that AI is just a tool, and with any technology revolution, there will be people who adopt and use the technology in order to deliver creativity. I mean, we've seen this since we started painting on cave walls. You look at the sorts of transformations and explosion of creativity that have come from previous digital technological tools like Photoshop. Photographers were up in arms when these sorts of tools were introduced, talking about, that it's not real, that it's not creative, that, where's the artistry in these types of applications of technology? But we see that this is just another tool in a creative arsenal of things that people can be bringing to life in all sorts of aspects of creativity. The other thing to think about when we're thinking about the kind of creative applications of this sort of technology, AI and the way that generative AI models work as well, they are prediction engines, and they're trained, as Fiona mentioned, on these enormous corpus of data. And the training areas that they're kind of drawing upon have a huge influence on what the outputs of these models are going to achieve. So when we start to think about the kind of training data that they're being trained on, you can end up with a lot of kind of inherent issues in that data. But what they are is kind of a averaging machine. And so when you think about creativity, humans really value kind of edge case creativity, things that are surprising, things that are unusual, things that kind of inspire you in ways that you haven't experienced before. So the kind of artistry that comes with human creativity, that's not necessarily the playground for Gen AI. So we have this kind of fear of a sea of sameness that comes from, the average of the internet, which these models can kind of move towards. They're great at conventional output. So if there's a well-established way of structuring creativity, these models are great at it. So, the kids using it to do a high school essay, for example, there's a really well-worn path for what a high school essay should look like. You've got the beginning, the middle, the end. You've got your arguments and your support and things like that. Legal documents, great conventional approaches to these things. But when you start to get into the creative space and you're trying to do something new and original, that's where the human input, the judgment, the assessment, the quality angle lies. And that's where we think there's a real tension, that there'll be a huge sea of sameness, people using these tools to create an enormous amount of, middling to low quality content in the world. But that's not what people want. People want high quality, stimulating, original, creative thought. That's always been the way. The creative people who can learn to use these tools, they'll still have, a great success in the market. It'll just create probably more of a distinction between the people who can use these tools creatively versus, kind of an engine room of low quality content. And I think that's where the challenge lies. We're going to have to wade through a lot more low quality content to find the nuggets of gold that comes with these sorts of tools, perhaps.
Thanks, Stephen. Anybody else wants to jump on this?
Look, I think for, when we talk about AI or tech in general, it's more about, as health professionals, they are tools that's going to help us better diagnose, not necessarily replacing anything or again, as Stephen said, it's the more tools to improve the human experience, to reduce certain barriers. In our case, I remember with COVID, during, all dental clinics were shut down, and I got together with a number of colleagues and started a foundation to basically help people with their dental concerns. And for us, it's like, well, at the time, it's like, we'll just take a photo, send it through, and sort of have a look kind of thing. But then we started looking at, okay, what tools are there that's going to help the dentist basically analyze certain things with better accuracy and better photos and so on. And then we started sort of looking into what's out there. All the tools out there, you still need the human expert, the human touch, the human connection to actually basically sift through all that information and eventually come to a conclusion. So we're looking at AI as almost a helping tool that will make the dentist's job or the health profession job a lot easier, diagnose better, communicate much more efficiently, but also it gets patients engaged in their treatment as well. So let's say with orthodontics in the past, it's all up to the orthodontist to actually take care of the whole process. Whereas now the patient is heavily engaged with what's happening in the mouth. They can actually see it in real time. They can communicate in real time, which means it's saving the orthodontist a lot of time. The patient doesn't need to come into the surgery as often. And as a result, that experience is enhanced. And I think AI in general, in the health field, has incredible benefits, because there are a number of issues that we face. And I think if you get something that's going to help in diagnosing better and improve that patient experience, then that's basically what we're after.
I think admin is kind of potentially cut a lot, and the experience of patients that you can deliver at scale, it's amazing. Fiona, I wanted to actually ask you something different, if you don't mind. We are getting kind of almost towards the end, half-hour mark. I want to combine this question into one. There was two, so see how you go with it. I know you started talking about the designer, sort of what's the role, but we haven't kind of really dug into that. So I want to go back there, and what Stephen was saying. Well, there's going to be a lot of content out there that we kind of have to swim to the original. So what do you think is the role of designer in an AI world? And do you have any, I mean, there's a lot, but do you have any sort of hot trends right now that you're kind of big fan of?
Yes, I can talk maybe trends, but also use cases. So I think to wheel back to answer all of that, I think the bigger question that is kind of bubbling up around all of this is we're all going to have to figure out, for the designers on the call, for anyone that's a leader in business, you know, where are we going to use it for, and where is this thing just completely annoying? Like, what are the really relevant use cases? And I think in a lot of ways, the only way we can do that is via genuine experimentation. And I think what is really interesting about where we are at the moment versus historical digital transformations or big change moments across history for our organisations is this is happening at the independent level. I don't think people have ever been this empowered with the tools that we have because of the consumer-facing tools that we've got, like your ChatGPTs, your Midjourneys, all of these things. You know, AI now has an interface. The fact that we can all interact with this means that we are all driving that revolution. So the first question for every single person is, you know, and this is actually borrowing from Ethan Mollick, who I recommend everyone following, it's a newsletter he's got called One Useful Thing. He's a Wharton professor. And he talks about the concept of being a centaur, so working your way towards being a centaur. So if there's any kind of Harry Potter geeks out there, you'll know that's the half horse, half person. But he says, you know, start with the question of, you know, where in my life do I not want to delegate to AI? Like in my case, for me, that's writing. I need that process. And Stephen touched on that before, that sometimes, you know, the creative process, if we do away with that by getting rid of that scary first blank page, we're going to lose that, you know, what actually makes us human. So decide what you will never delegate. For you, some leaders, it may be, I'm never going to delegate a one-on-one to some kind of AI avatar, no matter what this future looks like. So be really clear about what your guardrails are. Then think about what are the things that you will delegate. Like, where is the toil? Where are the things that happen every single day? Like Google are a great example of an organization who went AI first 15 years ago. And when they did that, a big thing that they did was a grassroots, like bottom-up effort, where every single person in the first 90 days they're onboarded audits their own desk. So they say, where is the toil? Where is the grunt? Where is the frustrating thing that I should be outsourcing so I can focus on the more important strategic, creative, whatever it is? This is not new to them. That's 15 years ago and an evolution. So doing that on your own desk, you know, figuring out what it is that you want to change and how you're going to change it will be something that designers and anybody else here on the call can do and should do. To bring it back up to your question of what is the role of designers in organisations, I think it is partly leading that big question. You know, what are some of the trends that we should be looking at? How can we have better conversations with these machines? How should we be making decisions about what we invest in? You know, the products that are off the shelf, the kinds of things that maybe we want to build internally ourselves. I think at the moment, the mood within designers is everyone's feeling a bit sidelined. There's been mass layoffs across the industry. There's always that, do we have a seat at the CEO table? I think we're about to see a massive renaissance. I think the problem set that is coming because of the speed of this technology and the tech debt that's building is going to mean that the role of these people will be absolutely front and center. And that goes for anyone that's not a classical designer, hence the definition before, but even a design thinker. If you're just someone who thinks about, you know, what's the problem? We diverge, we converge, then your place in the sun is coming. I firmly believe that, and I don't think I'm alone. In terms of kind of trends and techniques, we started an experiment in August last year, and we've done around 3,000 hours of different experiments using our own work, client work, and others, basically using genuine people-done design versus the machine doing it, and the people as the control group. So how do we know if what's synthetic is worth it or if it's no good? And the results of that are quite mixed. So there are areas like strategic research, like, you know, doing your SWOTs, your kind of typical trends analysis, your competitor analysis, outsource that as much as you can with human oversight, a lot of possibilities. Typical kind of ethnographic research, obviously we want to keep on doing that. We still want to talk to people and we want to be involved in that. But you can outsource a lot of the synthesis in part, and that's a messy area, but some of that can be done. And then I think on the creative side, you know, agreeing we don't want to take away the human element, but there are some specific ideation techniques that I believe machines are better at than people. And one of those is a substitution technique. So, for example, working with a large retail client, we were able to help them understand how they could get some substitutions for things like palm oil in muffins, for example. So what are other ingredients that they could work with that was to sub out something that was not as sustainable? Other ways you can do that is within certain materials. Manufacturing are doing this as well. What are some of those combinations of particular formulas and chemicals? So those kinds of things obviously need to be checked, but those kinds of things where you're talking about large source material you need to come up with new formulations or new ideas, I do see big potential for, and then we can get on to kind of prototyping and image generation and those things. But I think, again, this comes down to, you know, getting curious, figuring out what those tools are, being analytical and being, you know, do I want to be the centaur? Like where would I do this? Where wouldn't I? Having a play. And then actually, again, for everyone on this call and all of us, like sharing your knowledge. I think there's a bit of either people are using it and are not telling everyone, or people are too afraid. I don't know where we sit at the moment, but I think we need a bigger discourse of this is what's working, this is what isn't. Don't rely on the machine for this because, you know, you're going to end up in legal hot water or something else. I think if we had more of that sharing, we'd all be, and thanks for you for doing it, George, and you know, Joseph and Stephen as well. But I think we need to keep doing this.
I think there's an interesting trend that I'm seeing across my clients, which is kind of stemming from the lack of trust in the underlying models and the output. If there's not a human in the loop, if there's not human judgment in the output of this stuff, there's a real reluctance to turn it loose on the world, and particularly in corporate situations. The risk profile that people are putting around this sort of technology, even with the obvious potential of it, there's still a risk profile that people are applying around this stuff where, you know, they do want to be confident that the outputs have been sense checked, that there is some governance and oversight on what these models are generating. And in certain circumstances, particularly in regulated kind of industries, you know, in clinical areas as well, that needs to have an incredibly high hurdle to jump for these tools to kind of go direct to consumer. So I think there's as a tool to enable, you know, smart people with experience to do what they do. As a back of house solution, there's a lot of investment going on in those areas in a lot of the clients that I work with. There's a real reluctance to turn them kind of loose on customers in the wild just yet. You know, there's going to be a lot of work to be done to make sure that they are safe, that that the data isn't biased, that it's not discriminatory, that it is responsible, that all of those kind of applications, you know, add value to the end user, and that there's not any kind of adverse implications. So I think it's a pretty interesting space when you still have to have that human judgment before you can start to put this stuff out into the world.
Thanks, Stephen. You're opening this, I think, final question I wanted to ask you. I'm very curious to find what you think. This synthetic versus real debate. We got a few more minutes left, but we could probably talk whole day on this topic. And there's certainly a lot. It feels like there's a new shiny toy on the shelves and everyone wants to use it. Nobody knows how. And we're going through the process of experimentation and finding out how do we play with it, what's the use case scenarios. And in a lot of, I guess, more corporate and established businesses is making sure that whatever it's put back on a shelf, the product is humanly tested and it's got all these qualities that we expect the product to have. But on a consumer base, we can play and we can do a lot of different things. It's just the big adoption. I'm thinking maybe 2 to 3 years before we kind of see something really amazing. But Shopify is already implementing things and everyone is implementing kind of really add-ons. But the bigger play and what we sort of seen a couple of years ago with the presidential elections is what happens when we kind of sort of step into the space where we can't distinguish what's real and what's not, and we have to, as humans, make a judgment. Is it a real person? Is this a real ad? Is this we actually heading towards this space as well. So as much as good things that we've sort of discussed a lot, maybe just touch on like a little bit about what's your opinion if the news, for example, are completely synthetic, and if the companies cannot perhaps anymore sort of pay the bills, or there's a new companies coming out and just kind of pumping out all this sort of stuff in the air. This is the real world that's actually not a sci-fi anymore. What's your opinions about that?
I think I've been talking about this with my kids a lot. So I've got teenage kids, and frankly, their bullshit filter is extremely well honed. So they're able to kind of sift through a lot of material that they're seeing on social media and things being shared around, probably a bit more effectively than a lot of adults I know. So I'm pretty confident that that people are able to kind of sift through this stuff relatively effectively. The issue that I see is just the sheer volume and scale that's possible now with these tools. So the fear around things like disinformation campaigns or political interference and that sort of stuff being delivered in a very weaponized way at enormous scale, that is a really real threat to to many areas of society and democracies in general. I think the ability to kind of interfere in people's decision making capability is now at an affordable scale for bad threat actors that wasn't previously. I mean, we've always had kind of propagandist media and, the need to kind of sift through the messages and filter out what are the sources that you've kind of been tuning into. But the ability to take that down, as Fiona kind of mentioned before, the kind of democratization of access to these sorts of tools and the ability to create kind of open source models that are very targeted on doing this sort of elements. That responsible AI angle is a very big concern, I think, for everybody in the industry right now. There's a lot of regulatory kind of discussion and impacts that might have.
Thanks, Stephen. That's very insightful. You guys?
Look, I think for us, while we use a chatbot, AI-powered chatbot, or even virtual assistants, it is important to have a qualified person as well for people to realize. I mean, as you said, while some people are comfortable and they think, okay, well, this is obviously AI generated, it's always important to know that there's a real qualified person at the end of that. So while 80% of, let's say, the work now, the communications, that sort of almost the routine answers that people need to get, that's sort of almost easy to push through. But it is important for patients to know, or that there is a real human, a qualified person that, if I have any suspicion that this is not right, I can actually reach out to that person and feel comfortable that the information that I'm getting is vetted, it's real, and it's accurate. So yeah, look, I think that there's got to be always something that is vetted and a human person, a qualified person behind it, making sure that if people have any concerns, that they can raise the issues.
Yeah,
we can't just add one. Oh, sorry.
No, we can't just let AI run things. We do need to have these controls in place. Sorry, Fiona, for interrupting.
It was a very, very quick comment, but just adding to that, I think with all of this, there's everything with AI that we have seen personally, and I think even just if we think about it academically, it has a dark side and a light side. It's kind of the yin and yang of AI. For every positive, there is a corresponding negative, it feels like, with this. And I think the synthetic argument is the same. There's a lot of really positive use cases for, even AI avatars in healthcare, for example, to aid people with loneliness and better patient care and all of these sorts of things. There'll be examples of that in education that they're working on. But equally, the big problem that we can't ignore that I think the guys are pointing to as well are the kinds of big, hairy problems or big, wicked problems that we should be focusing on. And that kind of coming full circle is, again, where, you know, the designer's role and anyone who is that kind of way-minded, the opportunity is, because these problems are going to present big opportunities for people to go out and start solving them as well. So
amazing. The only massive and big thing with AI is the scale. As Stephen, we've never seen anything. And I mean, this adoption of AI when it hit the shelves, was it end of last year or start early of this year? I don't even know, but it feels like it's been around for forever. Thank you so much, guys. Today was brilliant. I really enjoyed the chats, and you've given us a lay of the land from your perspectives. Is there anybody else that wants to ask a question? Thanks, David. Thumbs up. We are pretty much at the very end. Thanks for your time. Thanks for everybody for attending. We'll convert this into, oh, wait, we have one more. Reese. Okay, let's just stick for one more. From your experience, what do you see as the current barrier to implementation for generative AI at the large organizations, example, banks? This is knowledge, legal risk, you know, that sort of stuff.
I might jump on that one. We're doing a lot of work, for example, with banks in the implementation of this sort of technology. There's a couple of areas. So one that I talked about previously was the kind of trust angle. So there's a lot of confidence that needs to be built inside these organizations that these sorts of tools are trustworthy and reliable and will give good advice and, you know, be working in the best interests of customers and those sorts of things. That's one angle. The other angle that's kind of a bit of a barrier and might be a bit of a handbrake on adoption of this sorts of technologies is just the pace of change at the moment. So it's a bit too early to kind of bet the farm on exactly which sort of solution you might want to go and utilize. So there is, and Fiona mentioned it earlier, there is a bit more of an experimental approach to this stuff. So it's probably not at mass scale of adoption for big enterprises just yet. And that is a huge barrier for adoption in a big organization, because an experimental mindset, testing multiple different solution sets, having the kind of rigor around testing and learning, that's a real struggle for big organizations, just both from a mindset point of view, but also from an investment and management point of view. You know, it's not a critical scale where they can make a big transformative investment. It is much more experimental, and that makes it hard for big organizations to kind of manage that way of delivering this sort of technology, more so than an enterprise scale investment where the you know, the choices are a bit more limited and a bit more established and a bit more mature. So that's something that we see, like there's more of an experimental mindset needed at this point in the maturity scale. Yeah, and that's slowing some people down, the risk aversion and experimental mindsets.
It's actually linked to, with Stephen's comments, is linked to one of the trends that we didn't have time for, but what is around the corner is this concept of more embedded AI within your big trusty companies that everyone already has. Like Microsoft are on the edge of releasing some unbelievable tooling that will just become completely ubiquitous with the workflow, you know, with what you do day to day. So I think that wait and see actually is valid. And anyone who kind of says, you know, you must rush and you must get on board and you must do all of this is probably kind of self-interested if they're talking at adoption at speed, because this really is a time where there is absolute validity in what Stephen is saying about it's worth waiting. If you think about your kind of old home office, we were talking about this as an analogy the other day. I even remember we had an electric typewriter when my dad brought that home from work, and it was a big deal. And he had the fax machine and the electric typewriter, and we had, you know, his pager, and, you know, there's all these different things, plus the Encyclopedia Britannica. You know, to do a piece of work, you had to consult all of these different things. And actually generative AI feels a little bit like that at the moment. Like when we try to construct the workflow, we're a little bit in this, and then we're grabbing this, and then we're pulling in this, we're putting it in this, and everything feels a bit duct taped together. And I think the big guys and there'll be a lot of consolidation, a lot of M&A happening. We're going to start to see, you know, those groups get gobbled up, and we're going to start to see bigger tooling. So Reece, you know, that's probably, if you're at a bank at the moment, probably the smart people are thinking about that day of dawning pretty soon.
I'm very excited. I'm waiting for AutoGPT to see how can I use that. Well, multiply myself like in Matrix.
Yeah, I think my final comment on that is that a lot of the startup businesses that I'm seeing in the AI space raising millions of dollars worth of investment, the underlying kind of technology that they're applying is effectively a feature of one of these large technology companies in a few weeks, I think. So I've seen a lot of businesses where I'm like, well, that's just a underlying feature of one of these core platforms. So if you're looking at Microsoft's Azure services in GenAI, it'll be a feature. You know, if you're looking at Google's cloud platform, it'll be a feature. You know, it's going to be baked into the core models as opposed to being this kind of bolt-on architecture, perhaps, unless it's solving a really specific, you know, unique domain area. And I think, you know, Joseph's talked a bit about that, like, you know, that in a specific kind of clinical or, you know, dental environment, there's going to need to be that domain knowledge and that context that Fiona was talking about. That's critical. You know, and that's never going to be solved by a big model. It's going to always be solved by, you know, very specific challenge within a specific context. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of a disconnect perhaps between just the rate at which people are rushing at the kind of startup problem versus what the real underlying technology solution is.
Thanks, Stephen. Everyone's very excited, I guess. And they just want to put it to work. Let's end on this. Thank you so much for today. Great discussions, great insights, and thank you for sharing all that from your perspectives. Thanks everybody for attending as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks,
Great to see you all. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye.